There's a moment in life when everything seems to be in place, but something inside you whispers that it's not, that something changed without you realizing exactly when. You wake up, follow the routine, meet your commitments, but there's a strange feeling, almost imperceptible, that you're playing a role that no longer fits you. Like you're wearing clothes that yesterday fit perfectly, but today squeeze in places you didn't even know existed. It's not that something bad happened, it's not that you failed or lost your way. It's just that a quiet phase of your life has already started saying goodbye to you, and maybe you still don't have the courage to look at it head on and admit that yes, something is ending, and that it's okay to let it go. The truth is that life doesn't send formal notices when it decides to close a chapter of your story. It doesn't knock on the door with a signed document. Life acts much more subtly, almost cruel in its delicacy. It gradually removes the comfort from things, makes what was once just annoying become unbearable, transforms superficial conversations into true torture. And you, in the middle of all this, start wondering if you're going crazy, if you're being too dramatic, if everyone doesn't feel this and just moves forward without complaining. But no, it's not drama. It's not an exaggeration. It's just the end of a stage asking for passage, knocking on the door of your consciousness. Because ignoring this call won't make it disappear. It will only prolong the agony of living a life that has already ended on the inside. Have you felt this? That feeling that nothing changed externally, but something inside you is completely different? You look at your routine and everything seems to be in place, but there's a growing discomfort, a restlessness that starts small, like a pebble in your shoe, and grows until it becomes impossible to ignore. That weekly meeting you tolerated now exhausts you just thinking about it. That repetitive conversation with that friend now irritates you in a way you didn't feel before. That job that paid the bills now seems like a prison where you're serving time without knowing what the crime was. And the strangest thing of all is that the problem isn't in the things. The problem is in you. Because you changed, you grew, you evolved to a place where these things no longer make sense. This discomfort doesn't appear overnight. It accumulates. It grows in layers, it consumes you gradually until you can no longer ignore it. You try to rationalize, try to find external explanations. Maybe it's stress, maybe it's tiredness, maybe you just need a vacation. But deep down you know it's none of that. You know the problem is deeper, more structural, more definitive. And the more you try to sweep this discomfort under the rug, the more it grows, the more it intensifies, until every moment in your old routine becomes a painful reminder that you no longer belong there. This feeling of being between two worlds is one of the most distressing anyone can experience. You no longer fit into what was, but haven't yet arrived at what will be. And this limbo, this undefined space where you're no longer that old person, but also haven't yet become the new one, is where most of the confusion lives. The insecurity, the fear that paralyzes you in the middle of the night. You lie awake wondering if you made the right choices, if you're going in the right direction, if there even is a right direction. And while you're in this void, in this invisible transition, everything seems confusing, everything seems uncertain, because you lost the old references, but haven't yet built the new ones. You're navigating without a map, without a compass, trusting only in a fragile intuition that tells you that yes, you need to move forward, even without knowing exactly where. In this intermediate space, you no longer have the old identity to sustain you, but you haven't yet developed the new one enough to feel secure in it. It's like floating, without floor, without ceiling, without walls. Just you and the frightening vastness of all the possibilities that exist when you finally admit you're no longer sure who you are. And the people around you don't understand, because to them, you're still the same person. But inside, you're a stranger to yourself. You're someone who's unraveling and remaking simultaneously, and no one can see this process because it's completely internal, completely invisible, completely yours. And then life, in its silent wisdom, begins to do a cleanup. People drift away without big fights, without heated arguments. They just leave, as if an invisible timer had reached the end. Scenarios change, doors close, opportunities that seem certain evaporate into thin air. And you stand there, watching all this happen, trying to understand what you did wrong, trying to figure out where you messed up. But the inconvenient truth is that you didn't do anything wrong. These things simply fulfilled the role they had to fulfill in your life. And now it's time for them to leave to make room for the new. because holding on to what has already died will only prevent you from receiving what is still alive and pulsing, waiting for you on the other side of this transition. This cleanup is painful, it's scary, it's disorienting. You look around and realize your life is being dismantled piece by piece. The structures you built with so much effort are crumbling, the certainties you cultivated are dissolving, and you don't know whether you should try to hold on to what remains or simply let everything collapse and see what's left on the other side. The temptation to resist is enormous. Because losing is scary, change is terrifying, the unknown is paralyzing. But the truth is, you have no choice. This cleanup isn't happening by chance. It's happening because it's necessary, because it's an essential part of your evolution. If you're enjoying this content, you might also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. But before a new phase is truly born, fear appears with full force. It's not just any fear. It's not that superficial fear of a test or a presentation. It's an existential fear, deep, that messes with the foundations of your identity. Because what's at stake isn't just an external change. It's the death of an entire version of yourself. It's the end of a character you played for so long that you started to believe it was really you. And this character doesn't want to die. It will fight. It will convince you that you're crazy, that you should go back to the safety of what you already know. It reminds you of all your past failures, convinces you that you're not ready, that you should wait for the right moment. When in reality the right moment never comes. When in reality waiting is just another way of procrastinating the change you know you need to make. On the outside everything might seem exactly the same. You still wake up in the same place, still meet the same people, still fulfill the same obligations. But inside something fundamental has already ended. Old habits you repeated on autopilot now seem strange, as if you were watching someone else do that and not yourself. Thoughts that used to dominate your mind now arise less frequently, with less force. Desires that seemed urgent, essential, have now completely lost their shine. And you look at them with a mixture of nostalgia and relief, grateful for no longer having to chase what you never really wanted. And along with this silent death of old versions of yourself comes an uncomfortable clarity about your own limits. You realize suddenly that you can no longer accept certain things, that you can no longer tolerate what you tolerated before without questioning. That sarcastic comment you used to let slide now hurts you. That lack of consideration you used to excuse now revolts you. And this doesn't mean you became more sensitive or weaker. It just means your consciousness expanded. That you evolved to a place where what was normal is no longer acceptable. Where you finally understand you have the right to be treated with dignity, with respect, with the same consideration you always offered others, but rarely demanded for yourself. These boundaries that were once invisible have now become clear and defined lines. And when you establish these boundaries, when you finally say no to what no longer serves you, people react. Some with surprise, others with resentment, others with withdrawal. And you wonder if you're being too difficult, if you should go back to being more flexible. But the truth is, you spent too long being flexible with others and inflexible with yourself. Now it's time to reverse that equation, to offer yourself a little of the compassion you've always had in abundance for others. You feel exhausted, profoundly tired, but it's not a tiredness that comes from the body. It's a tiredness of the soul that arises when you spend too long sustaining a life that no longer matches who you're becoming. It's exhausting to pretend. It's exhausting to maintain the mask. It's exhausting to wake up every day and have to play a role that no longer fits you. And the worst part is that no one around you notices this tiredness. Because on the outside, you still function, still produce, still deliver. While inside you're falling apart, dismantling, preparing the ground for a reconstruction that hasn't even truly begun yet. This tiredness is different from any other you've felt. Because resting doesn't help. Taking a vacation doesn't help. Sleeping more doesn't help. What tires you isn't what you do, it's what you sustain. It's the incoherence between who you are inside and who you need to pretend to be outside. And the more you sustain this incoherence, the more energy it consumes, until you reach a point where you simply no longer have the strength to keep pretending. And then something interesting starts to happen. You feel a growing need for silence, for distance, for fewer people, less noise, less stimulation. You who were always available now need space, need solitude, need time alone to process everything that's happening inside you. And people don't understand. They think you're withdrawing, that you're isolating yourself, that something's wrong. But the truth is there's nothing wrong. You're just going through an internal reorganization. You're preparing to cross through this change. This withdrawal isn't escape. It's not cowardice. It's not evasion. It's protection. It's self-care. It's the wisdom of your own system trying to create the necessary conditions for transformation to happen. Just like a butterfly needs the cocoon, you need this period of retreat, this time away from the public eye, this space where you can unravel and remake yourself without having to explain to anyone. And if people don't understand, if they get offended, maybe that's just another sign that they're not prepared to accompany the version of you that's emerging. In this reorganization process, detachment happens almost automatically. Things that seemed essential lose their value. Objects you kept with such care now seem like just weight. People who occupied central places in your life start moving to the periphery. Not out of malice, not out of rejection, but simply because the phase ended. The attachment falls away because it no longer makes sense to attach yourself to something that has already fulfilled its function. And the interesting thing is that this detachment doesn't come accompanied by suffering. It comes with a kind of silent peace, a tranquil recognition that things have their time, that nothing is forever. You try to act like before, try to use the same strategies, the same automatic responses that always worked, but now they simply don't work anymore. That way of dealing with conflicts that always saved you now only makes things worse. That defense mechanism that protected you now isolates you. That character you built with so much care now crumbles at the first pressure. Because it's no longer sustainable. Because reality changed. Because you changed. And insisting on maintaining an old identity in a new reality is like trying to use an old map to navigate a territory that has already been completely redesigned. And if these words are making sense to you, if you're recognizing these signs in your own life, consider leaving your like and subscribing to the channel now. Because maybe you need more reminders like this throughout this crossing. And the estrangement comes. That disturbing moment when you look at yourself in the mirror and don't completely recognize who's on the other side. You know it's you, but at the same time it doesn't seem like you. It seems like someone you're meeting for the first time. Someone who has your features, your voice, your memories, but who thinks differently, feels differently, acts differently. This is scary, because identity is the anchor that keeps us stable. And when this anchor starts to move, when you're no longer sure who you are, the ground disappears beneath your feet. It's as if you were two people at the same time. The old one who's dying and the new one who's being born. And in this middle ground, you're not completely either one. You're just transition, just movement from one state to another. But in the middle of all this confusion, all this internal chaos, something subtle starts to happen. Small choices begin to reflect who you really are. Not who you think you should be. Not who others expect you to be, but who you truly are, in your purest essence. You start to act with more alignment, even without having all the answers. You just feel that certain things are right and others are wrong. And you start to trust this intuition, this internal wisdom that was always there, but that you ignored for so long because you were too busy trying to fit in, trying to please. This reconnection with your truth happens in small moments where you choose honesty instead of performance, where you choose authenticity instead of acceptance, where you choose to be faithful to yourself instead of being convenient for others. And each time you make one of these choices, something inside you strengthens, something aligns, something falls into the right place. And when this reconnection starts to happen, the fear of losing people during this transition emerges. Because you know, deep down you always knew, that some relationships only exist as long as you remain the same. Certain friendships, certain bonds, were built on top of a version of you that no longer exists. And now that you're changing, these relationships start to shake, to crack, to show their fragilities. You wonder if it's worth it, if it wouldn't be easier to just go back to being who you were. But the truth is you can't go back anymore, because that person you were has already died. And trying to resurrect them would only create a ghost, an empty imitation of something that's already gone. This fear of losing people is real, it's legitimate, it's painful. Because human connection is one of our most basic needs. But what's even more terrifying is the idea of spending the rest of your life betraying yourself, abandoning yourself, rejecting yourself so that others won't reject you. Of becoming a stranger to yourself just to remain familiar to those who knew you in another phase. Along with this fear also comes guilt. That silent guilt of changing while the people around you remain in the same place. You look at your friends, your family, and realize they're still the same, while you're transforming into something different, something they might not recognize. And you question whether you're being selfish, whether you're abandoning these people. But changing isn't abandoning anyone. Changing is simply stopping abandoning yourself. It's finally giving yourself permission to grow, to evolve, to become who you were always meant to be. The truth is, you're not responsible for the evolution of others. You don't have to wait for everyone to be ready to grow along with you. Each person has their own time, their own rhythm, their own process. And if you're ready, if the call has come, if the phase is ending, you need to move forward. Even if that means walking alone for a while. Even if that means accepting that some relationships have an expiration date. And then, after this whole process of discomfort, of fear, of guilt, of estrangement, comes the silent confirmation that it's over. It's not a voice. It's not an external sign. It's not concrete proof you can show others. It's just a deep, unshakable certainty that arises from within. That tells you that yes, the phase ended. The cycle closed. There's no going back. And this certainty no longer depends on anyone's opinion, because it comes from such a deep, such a true place, that any external questioning sounds just like noise. This confirmation is liberating and scary at the same time, because with it comes the responsibility to act, to do something with this knowledge, to no longer be able to pretend you don't know what you know. You can no longer go back to denial, to procrastination, because later has arrived. The moment is now. In this moment, without you consciously realizing it, your mind, your emotions, your attitudes are being adjusted to sustain something bigger. You're preparing internally for a new level of life, for a phase that demands a more mature, more conscious, more authentic version of yourself. And all this chaotic process, all this discomfort, isn't a detour. It's not a mistake. It's exactly the necessary preparation. It's the soil being plowed, the roots being strengthened, the structure being reinforced so you can not only reach this new level, but remain in it. This preparation is invisible to others, and often even to yourself. But it's happening. It's creating in you the capacity to handle challenges the old version could never face. And maybe you'll only realize this later, looking back, seeing how you changed, how you grew, how you became capable of things that before seemed impossible. When a phase truly ends, when a cycle really finishes, there's no return. You can try to go back, you can even pretend nothing changed, but it won't work. Because something fundamental transformed. Because you saw things you can no longer unsee. There's only crossing, only passage from one state to another, only forward movement. This impossibility of return isn't a curse, it's a blessing in disguise. Because if you could go back, you would. You'd choose the comfort of familiarity instead of the discomfort of growth. But life, in its infinite wisdom, doesn't give you that option. It pushes you forward, even when you resist. And maybe that's the greatest act of compassion life can have with you, not letting you go back to a place that no longer serves you. And you, yes, you who are reading this now, are already crossing. Maybe you haven't fully realized it yet, but the truth is, the process has already begun. Every discomfort you feel, every restlessness that arises, every time you catch yourself questioning whether you're in the right place, all of this are signs that the crossing has already begun, that you've already left the old shore behind and are now in the middle of the journey. Making an analogy with nature, think about the seasons. Autumn doesn't ask the leaves if they're ready to fall. Spring doesn't wait for you to be prepared to bloom. Each season simply arrives and fulfills its role. Because there's a natural rhythm that doesn't depend on our will. And life works this way too. When it's time for a phase to end, it ends. With or without your permission. And just as trees don't die when they lose their leaves, you won't die when you leave this phase behind. You'll just go through a necessary dormancy. Through a retreat, where energy now goes to the roots, deepening, strengthening. And maybe now you're in your personal winter, where everything seems dead. But beneath the surface, the roots are working. And when the time comes, you'll bloom in a way you've never bloomed before. What helps me most personally in moments of transition is remembering that discomfort doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. It just means I'm growing, that I'm expanding beyond the old limits. And growing hurts, it always hurt, it always will hurt. Because growth requires you to leave behind what is small and comfortable to embrace something bigger, more aligned with who you really are. I know it's hard to hear this. I know you might have been expecting a more comfortable answer, but there's no shortcut to growth. And I completely understand when you feel like you can't take it anymore. It's completely valid to feel that. But I hope you continue. I hope you cross through. I hope you give yourself the chance to discover who you can become on the other side of this transition. It's really good when we try to judge less, both ourselves and others who are going through transitions. When someone changes, it's easy to judge. It's easy to criticize. But maybe that person is just crossing through their own end of cycle. And if instead of judging you simply offered compassion, understanding, the necessary space for them to cross through in their own time. Everyone is doing the best they can with the resources they have at this exact moment, and that includes you. No one wakes up thinking about how they're going to fail. Everyone is just trying to survive, trying to make sense of a world that often makes no sense at all. And when you understand this, it becomes much easier to have compassion. It becomes much easier to forgive. Be deeply grateful for not understanding everything, for not having control over everything. This uncertainty, as distressing as it may be, is the greatest proof that you're alive, that you're in motion. Life isn't a straight line. It's a labyrinth full of surprises. And that's not a defect. It's exactly how it should be. Because a totally planned life isn't a life. It's just a mechanical repetition of patterns that don't transform you. There's no path without pain, but you choose which pain to carry. You can choose the pain of remaining in a phase that has already ended, the pain of pretending everything's okay, or you can choose the pain of transformation, the pain of crossing through the unknown, but at least with the dignity of being honest with yourself. The pain of stagnation is chronic. It never passes. It just accumulates, day after day, until you realize you spent your whole life avoiding truly living. The pain of transformation, on the other hand, is acute. It's intense, but it passes. It has an end. And on the other side of it exists a version of you that's freer, more authentic, more aligned with your truth. The inconvenient truth is that no one's going to give you permission to change. This permission, you'll have to give yourself. And you'll have to do it even when all the external signals are telling you not to. Even when your rational mind is listing all the reasons why you should stay exactly where you are. But stop for a second and ask yourself if you really need someone's permission to live your own life. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one who will have to live with the consequences of your choices. You're the only one who will have to wake up every day with the feeling of having been faithful or unfaithful to yourself. But maybe you'll discover, on the other side of this crossing, that the loneliness you feared so much wasn't real loneliness. It was just the necessary space for you to finally find yourself, to reconnect with who you are without all the masks. Maybe you'll discover that the people who really matter will stay by your side, because they love the essence of who you are. And maybe you'll also discover that some losses were necessary, that some people needed to leave not because you didn't love them, but because the type of connection was specific to a phase that ended. And insisting on maintaining that connection after the phase passed would only create a forced, artificial, painful relationship for both sides. There are relationships that are for a lifetime, and there are relationships that are for certain seasons. And knowing how to differentiate one from the other, knowing how to honor each type for what it is instead of trying to transform a seasonal relationship into something eternal, is a wisdom that comes with maturity, with experience, with the willingness to accept that not everything is forever, and that this doesn't diminish at all the value of what was while it was. When you finally understand that a phase is ending, when you stop resisting and start cooperating with the process, something changes. You stop fighting against the inevitable, and you start allowing yourself to be exactly where you are. To trust that this moment of transition has its own value. This cooperation isn't surrender. It's actually the greatest demonstration of strength you can have, because it requires immense courage to trust in something you can't control. This video appeared to you now not by chance. It appeared because something in you already knows. Something in you already recognized that yes, a phase is ending. And you don't need to have courage for everything all at once. You don't need to make all the decisions today. You just need to recognize what's already happening. You just need to stop pretending everything is as it always was. Make your conscious choices and remember you're not alone in this crossing. Everyone who has ever evolved went through this same process, felt this same fear. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who cross through isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to continue even with fear. It's the courage to take one more step even without seeing the complete path. And when everything seems too heavy, remember you're already enough. You always were enough. You don't need to transform into someone extraordinary to deserve love, respect, dignity. Transformation isn't to make you more valuable. You already have inherent value just by existing. Transformation is just to align you with who you always were, to remove the layers of conditioning that distanced you from your essence. The phase is ending. And this isn't the end of everything. It's just the end of a chapter. And every end of a chapter is also the beginning of the next one. And you're already writing the first lines of this new story, even if you haven't realized it yet.